morning, and welcome to the Appleton Museum of Art in Ocala, Florida. And welcome to painting a sunflower this morning. I actually want to show you two different versions. One is more your standard yellow, lots of different yellows. And this one is a little more stylized. Okay. And really, how you do this morning is totally up to you. You know, if you want to make it more realistic, great. If you want to make it more stylized or a little more abstract, absolutely. Whatever you would, like to do with this. I have an 11 by 14 canvas. I've got all my basic primary colors, black and white, and that's usually what we use here at the Appleton when we do our painting classes. I tend to use mostly flat brushes, so let's begin. First thing I want to do is make the circle the middle of my flower. Now, where you decide to put it is totally up to you. If you want to draw it freehand, I've got a piece of charcoal here. This is the cap to one of my jars of paint. I could, trace this if I want to. But I'm going to kind of freehand this. I want a nice big circle here, a nice middle to my flower. And of course, this can also be adjusted. And I'm doing this with charcoal because I am going to start with a brown. I am going to start in the middle of this flower, so I don't have to worry about the black charcoal with the yellow paint. I'm also going to just block off the middle here. I eventually will darken up. So that's the middle of my flower. And then I've got my petals that I'm going to put on the outside. And you may see that I've already drawn some of them. Before I start painting, I'm going to take a piece of paper here. When we do start this, it's going to be a curve and a curve. Now, if you want that perfect shape, that's fine. But you may want to do something that a little more stylized. And then we're going to leave a little bit of space in between. So some of them can be skinnier, but I just wanted to give you that idea. If I don't want this to be perfect, so maybe I can put a real little bump in that one too. So let's go back to that painting. The first thing I'm going to do is mix up a brown for the middle of my flower. So I'm going to take some blue, a little bit of red, take a little bit of yellow. I take a little more red, and I'm going to mix up some brown. I might add a little touch of black. And I'm just going to go around. I'm going to paint in. And actually, I need to mix up a little more paint here. Take some blue, some red. Just going to paint this in. So with a flat brush, I love to use a flat brush because I can just drag this. And then I'm just going to paint this all in. I'm just going to leave this because we'll go back into this later. Now I want to start adding my petals. I'm going to begin with a basic yellow. We'll add different shades of that, yellow. I'm going to add maybe a little bit of oranges. So I'm going to load up my brush. I'm going to start painting in. I'm not going to go too close here. Eventually, I'm going to go back and maybe pick up a little of that brown. But right now, I'm just going to maybe outline some of my petals. Now they can overlap. They don't have to be those perfect round petals. You can see some of my paint is going to be kind of thick, and that's fine. So this is another petal. I am going to leave a little space so I can see later. I'm going to go back with some oranges or some deeper yellow. And if you find it's easier, and I do, turn that canvas, especially when I'm trying to draw the sweeping curves, of the petals. I've got my first layer of the sunflower's petals with a dry brush. And I like to use a dry brush a lot. I do want to pick up a little bit of that brown and kind of sweep it into the yellow petals. We will define that middle more later, but I just want to pick up a little bit of that. I wipe that brush off. I don't want too much brown, but I just want a little bit. And I'll keep wiping that just for a little bit of shading there. You don't want too much brown, and that's why a dry brush is kind of nice, because it's only going to pick up a little bit and drag that in there. I don't want a lot of brown. Now I want to put some petals, in between here, but I want to have them a little bit different. So I have a darker yellow that I can mix in here. If you do not have, two different shades of yellow, you absolutely could take a little bit of red and mix that in. I don't want to add brown because I don't want those dark those petals back here to be too dark. I just want them a little bit. I like to add a little bit of red. I'm going to put some petals in between. So you kind of want to pick up. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put a little bit. In between. I'm actually going to come in here with this in between these two petals. Well, I've got those petals, they're overlapping. Some of them are going to be bigger. This one isn't as big as that one. That's fine. I actually could even put another one in here, which I might go back and do. And I'm going to leave a little bit of white space because I want to go back later on and I'm going to put green in my background. So I want some green in between here. So I don't want to fill in every single spot. I do like this darker. I'm going to mix up some more of this, but just maybe a little bit lighter than I had, because I'm going to keep going on these petals. You want to just keep layering your colors until you get a beautiful effect of different shades of yellow, different tones. So I'm going to go back this way. I'm going to come down in the middle here, and I'm not going to go all the way out to the tip of that petal. And I'm going to cover up a little of that brown. Yeah, I might make that a little bit darker. I'm just going to keep adding paint to this. I want different shades of this yellow. We're going to get even a little more extreme here, but I just want to add this little bit of orange here. And just kind of sweep it out into the petal. And each petal is going to be different, so you might have some that have more of this yellow in it, this deeper yellow, and some that, I'm going to go right over that brown. I'm going to pull some of that up with my orange. Now, where you've got some that are overlapping, I want to kind of distinguish the outline of some of them as they overlap others. If you don't like the orange tones, you could, I'm going to make another little puddle here. You could use more brown. Take some of this and mix a little brown with your yellow. I'm going to get another brush here because I've got an awful lot of paint on here. So I could go with more of a brown tone, and like on this one here, I have more browns than I have oranges, especially in those back ones. So you could do that, or you could do more of an orange or deeper yellow. Let's do a little bit of that brown right in between those two. So there's a little bit of that brown tone. I really want to distinguish my front petals from my back petals. I did that with the deeper yellowish orange, but I'm going to do it again with that brown. And it's just quick little strokes. Each flower is going to have a little more or a little less, but you want to make sure your brush strokes are coming out from the middle, because that's where those petals are coming from, they're growing from. So you want to, again, make sure your brush strokes are going naturally in the direction of the flower, the growth of the flower. This one might be a little bit darker, but that's okay. And if that's too dark, take a dry brush and go over some of that and just kind of blend it out. Like I said, I'm going to continue to go back into each one of these. And this time I'm going to go back to more of an orange and outline, not really outline, but add more distinction to the larger petals in the front. So I'm going to mix up another yellowy orange. So I'm going to go back into this again. And this petal is overlapping this petal. So I'm going to put a little bit, not too much paint on that one, a little bit more in here of that orange. Got a little too much orange, so I'm going to take, with my dry brush, I'm going to take some of that out. I'm just going to kind of blend that into the paint, because that was a little bit too much. So what I mixed up here, I'm finding is a little too dark, so I'm going to make myself another puddle and use this lighter yellow here, with a little bit of that mixed in. The nice thing about with the acrylics, you can just, as I did with the dry brush, is take some of that out, but you can certainly just paint over that. How's this one? That's a little bit better. So I'm going to come in. This petal is overlapping this petal, so I want to add a little bit dark in here. And I will add more later. The more layers of paint I found, and the different shades of yellows and oranges, just make this a lot more interesting than if you stuck to that plain yellow. And I'm going to go right back down to the middle of the flower. This petal overlaps this one, so I want some darker in here. Actually, you could add a little bit of this to each one of your petals. You can bring it out further to the point. So you get that variation. With a different brush, I'm going to pick up a little white and make a puddle of a very pale yellow. So you've got a basic yellow, you've got a yellowy orange, you've got some brown added to your yellow. This time, I'm going to go out towards the tips, and I just want to add a little bit of light yellow. So I've got some white, not the whole petal, just maybe some of that. Again, different variations here. Put a little yellow, light yellow there. I like the dark in here, so I'm going to go and add some. I don't want to go close to the middle. I'm just going to add it towards the edge there. Maybe a little bit on this edge, not a lot. Again, I'm leaving these white spaces because I do want to put some green in there. I don't want this whole side to be total yellow or orange. I'm just kind of want to get an overall look of what I've got here, and do I want more yellows and oranges out here in the underneath layer of petals? I think I do. And I tend to like the oranges. This is my dry brush, so I'm going to wipe that off. Got to keep that dry brush so I can use that. And I'm going to mix up a little, actually even more of an orange here. I tend to go through an awful lot of brushes. Right now I've gone through 6 brushes already. So when I paint, I keep a lot of flat brushes, different sizes. This size is what I use most of the time. I'm going to take some more red. And I'm going to go into this puddle that I've got here. And I want real orange. This I'm going to use very sparingly. And I'm actually going to use a smaller brush. I want to add a little bit more orange to my painting here. I'm going to add more to the back. So I'm going to get a smaller flat brush, just a little bit smaller here. I'm going to add a little bit of orange into my back petals. And just bring it out a little bit. Now, if you prefer the brown, just stick to the browns, that brownish yellow. But I want to add a little more color to this. And if you think that is too dark, just go back and get a little bit of plain yellow and just blend that in. Just keep kind of go over that and tone that down if you think it's too orange, okay, which I think this is a little dark right now. So I am going to take a little plain yellow and just kind of tone that down. But I do like this orange. So I'm going to put this, and then I'm going to take that dry brush and let's see. Okay, this paint has dried, so the dry brush is not really helping me blend. I'll just add some more yellow paint to that. I think what I'm finding is this is too dark. So let's take some more yellow. I think that's a little bit better. This is all personal preference. Like I said at the very beginning, if you want yours more stylized, if you want it more realistic, then you stick to really the yellows and the brown tones. I do want to put a little more orange in mine. I want to go over that little bit of brown. I'm going to come in between so I know what is my second layer. or my back layer of petals compared to that first layer. I'm actually going to add a little bit to those front petals. Just to kind of help them blend in. Since you've got orange in the back petals, I'm going to put a little bit of orange into my front petals as well. Just some little strokes. Remember, I said you can always go back over this. It's all about how you want your flowers to look. I want to make sure I can really see this petal is overlapping this petal. I'm going back to that yellow and white. I'm taking, let's bring some over here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to mix again. I'm just going to add white to this puddle of yellow. And I'm going to go back again and add some highlights. You might even want to use a pure white with a small brush just to maybe add just a little highlight. And if you don't like that, again, take one of your brushes that already has paint on it, go over that and blend that in, or take a dry brush. A pure white can sometimes be too dramatic. But if you wanted to add a little bit, like on the tips of those petals, you could do that. The more layers, I think, on these, the prettier this painting is going to be, because you're just going to see all different shades of yellows and oranges as you look through those petals. As this one curves, I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight there on that curve. And I'll do the same thing up here. Sometimes also, take a minute, and I'm working flat. I don't know if you're using an easel, but if you are working flat, you need to put it up and see, and maybe even take a step back. And right now, I'm going to go back, I think, and add some pure yellow to some areas. The original yellow that I started with, because it's getting a little confusing to me up in here. So I am going to put some just plain yellow back in there. And some down in here. I just want some plain yellow. Any place that you think needs that bright touch again. I'm pretty happy with my petals in the background. I'm going to find one of my little brushes. I like the oranges. So I'm going to start in here, right close to the middle. I really want to see some color. I'm not looking to make this painting more of a realistic painting. I want to see some color and some different shades of yellows and oranges, and maybe make it just a little more dramatic. Don't be afraid to add color. Start it off kind of blending all your yellows and your pale yellows and your medium yellows and a little bit of orange, but now I want to get a little more dramatic on this. I really want to be able to see in between my petals. Even though I started with a more of a brown tone, I'm changing the way my flower looks here. What I've mixed up here is getting a little dry, so I am going to add a touch of water to loosen that up, because I do like this right here. Okay, right now I'm going to leave this. I may come back to it, not sure. But I'm going to leave the petals right now, and I'm going to go back into the middle, go back to the black. I want to put a pure black, that smaller circle in here, and I'm just going to dab up and down. I want to make a smaller circle in the middle. I'm going to go back again and mix a little bit of brown. But this time, I want to make it a little bit lighter. Let's see, I have some yellow here, some red. Just around this a little bit. I want to create a couple of different shades in here. So I'm going around the edge of my black. And eventually I will come out and clean up this area also where the petals start. But right now, I just want to make that a little bit lighter so I can really see that dark middle. Now, if you have a very tiny brush, I'm going to put some little white dots in the middle. But if you don't have a tiny brush, easiest thing to do is to use the end of your paintbrush and just hold this straight up and down. And I'm going to make some tiny little dots of white or light yellow in that middle. You don't want them really to be perfect little dots, perfect circles. So the end of your paintbrush works pretty good. Just to put a few in there. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Now this outside, because you've got yellows overlapping, or at least I do, and then the brown that got dragged out, but I went back and I painted over some of that brown with yellow. I do want to go back into that outside edge. And this is where, again, I'm going to not just stick to plain brown. I'm going to add a little bit of red here. And the brush that I use to do most of my browns and my blacks, I'm going to wipe that off a bit. I'm actually going to add a little bit of red down here. And I'm going to add some red around here. I know it's hard for you to see what I've got down here, but I'm going to mix up some red and some orange in that puddle that I had, and I'm going to go around the edge here. I add some pure red dots. Because again, I'm not painting this to be a realistic flower. I'm painting this the way I want it to look. I want it stylized. I want it just a little more interesting. So you can start to see the red. I can see the red, but as I'm looking at the screen, I do see the red starting to show a little bit here. You could put some green in here if you wanted to. Actually, let's do that. So I have mixed up some green here. Not sure if this is going to be too light, but you know what? A little bit too light. So I'm going to put a little more blue into that. Actually, Could even put some black into that green to darken that up. So if you did want to put some different colors in here, instead of just sticking to that brown, you could. This green is a little too bright for me, so I am going to go back to my red. And actually, as I add the red on top of that green, I am going to get that brown. Now, I can still see a little bit of green in there, so I actually do like that. I think I'm going to leave more of the just plain browns up here. You don't want to really make a real defined circle. You don't want to make a perfect edge to it. You want to make it a little bit of a raggedy edge. Do you know what? Once we start adding the green in the background, it is going to make everything pop. So then you can really see if you need to go back into any of these petals. So I've got like a medium green. Because my spaces are not that big, I've used this big flat brush to mix, but this is way too big for me to paint with. And this is where I put some black in this green because I want a little bit darker along the inside edges here. So I'm going to get a smaller brush. I want to take that dark green. Now, if you want to paint this nice and smooth, I want to give it more of a textured background. So I am going to go in here, but I'm going to kind of dab it. Initially, I am going to very carefully with my flat brush straight up and down go in between. Just going to kind of drag that out a little bit so I can outline. And actually, I think I put too much black, so I'm going to go back to that regular green. Basically, outline these a little bit. But then what I want to do is I want to just kind of dab. And I'm going to go along the outside edge, but I don't want to drag. I want to just kind of dab it up and down because I want to show a texture. So this background is going to be thick. I'm going to turn this, and I don't know if you can see the thickness of that paint. Again, it's up to you. If you don't want to do a green, you could do a blue background, which would be beautiful. I am not going to paint leaves. I want a textured looking background. So carefully with my flat brush, I'm going to go around the outside edge of those petals. And don't forget to paint the sides of your canvas if you're not going to put it in a frame, because then you can just put it on the wall. Now, if you want this to look like it's going to fade out a little bit, I'm going to grab another brush. Again, this is just, an option. You could add a little white out here and then take a dry brush and just so you're going from a little bit darker to lighter. It doesn't really show up too much on the camera here, but I mean, you could go from dark and then just fade it out. Now you can press, if you really want to see more of the shape of the brush, you could really just press and leave it there. If I want to get some darks, I'm going to put a little bit of black closer in and blend that in. out to the green. So you can get some darks and lights in there. If you left a lot of space on your canvas, you could paint leaves. I hope you all left some white around the edges, because this is going to help really to show your petals and your sunflower when you've got that dark green in there. And some of you, some people love to use a round brush and you can get that beautiful point. I just find it easier myself to use a flat brush. And this down in here, I still find it a little confusing. I didn't leave any white, but I am going to put some green in here because I think that needed it. So if you find that you need to, if your petals are kind of blending into one another, then this using the green to help separate those spaces works really well. Okay, so just a little bit right there. And I've got a little bit here. Now, as I look at my canvas, I don't know if you can notice, I'm going to go back and put yellow, and because when I lift this up, I can still see that white edge. And if I paint that green, it's going to start to show up on that petal there. So I am going to go back on those top pieces and add and just paint those yellow. But as I look around, I want to just kind of fill in and add any where I think I need more paint. Now this is also the time, now that you've got the yellow in here, the green in here, you can go back and look at your petals. Do you want to touch up anything again in here? Again, this is your opportunity. All of this is dry, so you can put in some really bright highlights with almost a pure white if you want to. I'm going to add a little bit right in there. The hardest thing is knowing when to stop. Again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some more dramatic lines in here. Okay, I'm pretty much done here, except for adding that little bit of yellow on the outside edges of my canvas where I had the flowers. Need a little bit of orange in here. But you want to make sure you have a finished looking canvas. So it is important to, to get those sides done. So it's just a matter of going around and doing any other little touch-ups or anything else that you want to add in here to highlight any of your leaves, your petals, not leaves. Every once in a while, just stop and take a step back and look at it. Because I'm sitting here close to this, because sometimes you're just too close to it and you need to stop and view it, take a step back and analyze what you've got. You know what? Thank you all for joining us here at the Appleton Museum of Art. We're in Ocala, Florida. I hope you enjoyed your painting today, and I hope you come back.